You are standing at a threshold. A quiet impulse nudges you toward a new direction. It feels light. It feels true. But then, a familiar weight pulls you back. You choose the path you've walked 1,000 times before. In that moment, you feel a strange sense of relief. It is the comfort of the known. But have you ever noticed the hollow feeling that follows that relief? It is a subtle friction that lingers in the background of your daily life. Most of us mistake this weight for protection. We call it being realistic. We call it staying safe. But there is a hidden mechanism at play behind this choice. It is a pattern that governs why we prefer a predictable struggle over an unknown joy. This choice is doing more than just keeping you steady. It is quietly reshaping your entire reality. We often think of safety as a sanctuary. It is the steady job, the familiar routine, and the relationships that don't challenge our boundaries. We tell ourselves we are building a foundation, yet many people overlook a strange contradiction. Have you ever noticed that the safer your life becomes, the heavier it often feels? You may have felt this weight during a quiet moment in your day. It is the feeling of being on track, while simultaneously feeling like you are drifting away from yourself. This pattern appears more often than we realize. We follow the rules of survival, yet we feel a persistent sense of internal resistance. Something unusual happens in these moments of friction.
We assume the resistance is coming from the outside world. We think life is being difficult. But this raises a deeper question. Why does the path of least risk often require the most effort to maintain? It is as if we are misinterpreting a vital signal. The mechanism behind this is far simpler than most people imagine. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see why this pattern changes everything. Consider the moments when you felt a sudden spark of inspiration, a project, a conversation, or a bold change that felt entirely right. For a brief window, the world seemed to respond. Doors opened, the right information arrived. Everything felt light. But then the old habit of safety returned. You hesitated. You chose the sensible route instead. Suddenly, the pattern becomes clear. The moment you reached for safety, the flow stopped. The doors that were opening began to swing shut. You likely interpreted this as a sign that your original idea was too risky. Most people misinterpret this shift as bad luck or a warning from reality. They call it the honeymoon phase ending. But the repetition suggests something deeper. Have you ever noticed how this resistance follows the exact moment you decide to play it safe? It happens in your career, your relationships, and your creative life. This is the strange consistency many people notice but few understand. The pattern behaves like a mirror, reflecting your internal retreat back to you in the form of external friction.
It is a recurring cycle that hides in plain sight, waiting for us to see the mechanism behind the struggle. The reason this pattern feels so persistent is because of a fundamental misunderstanding of what excitement actually is. We have been taught to view excitement as a fleeting emotion or a luxury, but in reality, that spark of interest is a sophisticated navigational signal. This is where the experience begins to make sense. The truth of who you are is not a philosophical statement. It is a specific vibrational frequency. When you feel a pull towards a certain path, you are actually feeling your own alignment. Choosing safety over that pull isn't just a practical decision. It is a choice to drop your frequency to match a reality that doesn't actually belong to you. This reveals something important about how reality works. We often think we are being responsible by ignoring our truth. In reality, we are simply disconnecting from the guidance system that makes life effortless. This teaching is far simpler than we usually expect. The signal has always been present, and it only feels unsafe because we are looking at it through the lens of survival rather than alignment. Suddenly, the pattern becomes easier to understand. The friction you feel isn't a punishment. It is a clear indication that you are trying to live in a reality that is too small for the truth of who you are. To understand why this happens, we have to look at how reality is actually structured.
Think of your consciousness as a radio receiver. You aren't creating the music. You are simply tuning into a frequency that already exists. This is the hidden rule behind the experience. Your beliefs act as the tuner. When you choose safety because you believe the truth is dangerous, you are effectively switching the channel. Suddenly, the pattern makes sense. You aren't being punished by life. You are simply witnessing the contents of a different frequency. This explains why the flow disappears the moment we ignore the signal. By choosing the known limitation, you have tuned yourself out of the reality where the flow was possible. This mechanism has been operating in your life the entire time, even in your smallest decisions. It is like a navigation system that recalculates every time you take a turn. When you align with your truth, the path is clear, because you are tuned to the frequency of the solution. When you retreat into safety, you are tuning into the frequency of survival. This reveals the rule behind the experience. Your reality cannot show you what you do not first vibrationally allow. This is why the pattern behaves this way. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are the operator of the dial, and the friction you feel is simply the sound of static when you are tuned between two different stations. If the mechanism is so simple, why is it so difficult to follow? This is where many of us lose the signal.
The moment excitement appears, a secondary system activates within us. It is the voice of conditioning. It is the part of us that has been taught to equate safety with predictability. We often mistake this resistance for wisdom or responsibility. We tell ourselves we are being realistic. We believe that caution is a sign of maturity, when in fact, it is often just the sound of a limiting belief trying to protect its own existence. This is the moment the inner voice begins to argue. It warns you of what might go wrong. It reminds you of social expectations. How many times has caution silenced the signal of excitement in your life? By choosing the safe thought, you are essentially telling your navigation system that you no longer trust the destination. This is why the momentum vanishes. You haven't just made a practical choice. You've reinforced a belief that the truth is a threat. Have you ever noticed yourself doing this? If you've experienced these moments where you talked yourself out of a spark that felt right, I'm curious to hear about it in the comments. Despite the weight of old conditioning, there is a simple method to begin shifting your alignment. It is not about making dramatic life changes overnight. It is a process of responding to the signal in the moment it appears. The formula is straightforward. First, look at the options available to you right now and notice which one carries the most excitement.
Second, act on that excitement to the very best of your ability. Third, follow that thread as far as it naturally goes. Finally, and most importantly, release any attachment to what the outcome should look like. This is where the navigation begins. By acting on the spark without demanding a specific result, you are telling the mechanism that you trust its direction. This is how the signal becomes action. The process works best when followed with a sense of curiosity rather than pressure. How different would a day feel if you followed the signal instead of the fear? You are simply testing a new frequency to see how reality responds. If this perspective resonates with you, consider subscribing for more explorations like this. If this idea helped you see your internal conflict differently, leave a like so more people can discover this mechanism.
The change rarely starts with something dramatic. It usually begins with a quiet curiosity you might otherwise ignore. Imagine you are working on a routine task, but a sudden impulse nudges you to reach out to an old acquaintance. Your mind immediately offers a reason to stay safe. They're likely busy, or it's been too long. But this time, you follow the excitement instead of the caution. You send a short message. This is often how the shift begins. A few hours later, that person replies with exactly the information you needed for a completely unrelated problem. You likely have already experienced similar moments without realizing their significance, dismissing them as simple luck. But look closer. The signal usually appears in these small moments. By choosing that tiny truth over the safety of silence, you shifted your entire afternoon into a state of flow. Have you ever followed a small curiosity that led somewhere unexpected? This is the mechanism in action. It is the navigation system rewarding your alignment with a tangible result. When you stop choosing the safety of the known, you allow the truth of your frequency to organize the world around you. This suggests something remarkable about the nature of reality. We often view our lives as a single, fixed timeline where we must struggle to find the right path. But suddenly, the pattern reveals a deeper meaning. The signals of excitement and the friction of safety are not just feelings. They are indicators of which version of reality you are currently inhabiting. This changes the way we understand the experience. Every time you choose your truth over a known limitation, you are not just changing your mind, you are shifting into a version of yourself that already exists as a potential reality. You are navigating through a field of infinite possibilities, using your frequency as the compass. This suggests that the life you seek is not something you have to build from scratch. It is something you have to tune into.
How different would life feel if we treated excitement as a navigation signal rather than a fleeting emotion? You may already be standing at the threshold of this realization in your own life. Every quiet impulse is an invitation from a version of you that is already free. The mystery of the mechanism is that you are never trapped by your circumstances. You are only ever one alignment away from a completely different experience of being alive. The path from safety to truth is rarely marked by loud announcements. It is found in the subtle shifts of your everyday awareness. Perhaps the signal has been there all along, waiting for you to recognize it behind the noise of your expectations. Sometimes the shift begins simply by noticing where you are holding back. As you move through the rest of your day, you may begin to see these patterns unfolding in moments you previously overlooked. The choice to align with your frequency is always available, hidden in the next small impulse that feels right. How many of these signals have appeared quietly in your life, only to be dismissed? The journey of awareness doesn't require you to have all the answers. It only asks that you begin to trust the signal more than the fear. If you feel ready to explore how this internal alignment begins to reshape the world around you, the next chapter of this discovery reveals what happens when you consistently follow that spark.